Education and Pro VC for Education at the University of Nottingham. And what we want to focus on today is not just kind of what has already happened, and we're very aware of how rapidly higher education has responded to the COVID crisis by shifting a lot of education online, but kind of where it goes from here. One of the famous observations about going digital is, first of all, you use digital technologies to replicate what you were doing previously in the old way. And then gradually you realize that once you've got the power of digital, you can do things differently. So how much innovation can we now expect with so much online education? As we tackle the virus with this fantastic news on the vaccine, will we go back to the world as it was? How different will it be? And what is the role, if any, of government in promoting high quality online education? Those are the issues. Before I just turn in one moment to Michelle, I would just add to encouraging you to use the Q&A function, not the chat function. The Q&A function is the best way of collecting questions. You can, of course, upvote and support questions that have been tabled. And that really helps me as chair identify the questions that are most pertinent to most participants, which helps me work out which ones to put. So, great. I think now, without any more ado, we welcome Michelle Donnellan, Minister for Universities, to open our conference this evening. Michelle, over to you.
Thank you very much, and good evening, everybody, and thank you for inviting me here to speak to you about the vital role that universities are playing in the overcoming of COVID and the utilisation of technology within that. Like everybody, I do regret that we can't be speaking in person, but this is a sign of our times and potentially very apt for the subject matter. But let me begin by being quite blunt. This pandemic has been beyond difficult for everyone, and we've all had to adapt and adapt fast. Fortunately, though, we are going through this at a time when the world has never been so connected, and the scientific and the research advances that we've seen and the leaps in recent decades have allowed us to communicate far better than we would have been otherwise. In fact, this conference comes almost 30 years to the day after British scientist Sir Tim Berners-Lee set out his plans to create the World Wide Web in 1990. And he sent his proposals over to fellow scientists in Kern, the European Nuclear Research Agency in Switzerland, and that would lay the foundations of the web and change the world really forever, changing the way we live, the way we work, the way we connect, and the way we learn as well. In fact, the impact on education and the sharing of knowledge has been, quite frankly, staggering. Yet, even in this pandemic, just 15 years ago, if it had been just 15 years ago, our response would have been so much harder. We wouldn't have had smartphones, we would have had slower internet speeds, we would have had a lack of infrastructure, and it would have made it tougher for families and tougher for businesses and students. And that's not for one moment, though, to underplay the very real challenge that has been faced from everybody on this call here today and across the globe. And we speak here in the midst of what are still national restrictions. But however, I am clear, and the government is clear, that education must be prioritised, including higher education, because we cannot ask the younger generation to put their lives on hold or their academic journeys on hold. And personally, I think that the impact on social mobility would be absolutely devastating if we were to do that. And this is something that I'm really passionate about. I was the first in my family to go to university. It helped change the course of my life, and it will be doing so for so many students who are studying today. So we cannot and we will not risk a lost generation of young people. But it is also possible to keep higher education going because of the innovations in technology that we have managed to utilise. The ability to offer blended learning has been enabled because universities can be so much more flexible. They can reduce the number of people on campuses at one time to be COVID secure by utilising the technologies available. And these innovations have meant that we've not just been able to continue to progress, but really that we have made leaps as well, and making sure that learning continues to be at that same level of quality, if not higher in some instances. And I think that is thanks to the hard work of universities, including everyone that's been a part of this journey, from lecturers to administrators to support staff. And I want to use this opportunity to once again thank everyone who has worked tirelessly to ensure that students can continue to learn and that research can continue. It's one thing the government prioritising it, but it's the people in the sector that actually make that a reality. So many universities, as we know, managed to get their material online and live within 24 hours. In fact, many have spoken to me about how the pandemic has encouraged the use of technology and digitalization that otherwise would have potentially taken up to 10 years. So it really has rocketed those developments and transformations that were already beginning. And there are so many innovative and dynamic examples. And I truly don't believe that these are going to end with the pandemic. I think that this has sparked a new era for higher education, one where universities can offer much more flexible learning, and technology can enrich those courses and the accessibility of those courses for all. And as organisations for debate of policy issues that have science, research, technology, of innovation elements, I know that many of you will have seen and continue to be involved in this change. And it's always hard for me when I speak at these things to single out examples in a speech, as I've seen so many. But I did want to quickly highlight a couple. So I recently visited Imperial College London, and I saw how their blended offer was putting in place an in postgraduate study in a business class that I attended, which was catering for both students there virtually and students that were self-isolating, students that were still overseas. And they were all interacting at the same time with the lecturers' questions and with one another. And this kind of resilience and innovation that you've been showing is benefiting students right now. And I believe it will lead to changes in the delivery and accessibility of higher education forever. And it is because of this kind of innovation that we are home to some of the world's leading universities that attract some of the very best lecturers and researchers. And it's also why international students continue to come to this, to the United Kingdom. And take Sotheby's Institute of Art as another example, a magnet for international students in particular. And many of them haven't managed to travel as of yet, but the technology that they've been utilising has meant that there hasn't been a gap in provision at all, despite those huge numbers. And that's also something that's true across the board. Because this has been a global challenge and a global pandemic, as we know, but I think we have been developing somewhat of an international reputation for the way that we've handled it in this sense. And my message here today is very simple. It's a massive thank you for the lengths that you've taken to put students first. And I want you to continue to do this and for us to support you in that mission. Earlier in the year, I set up a higher education task force to bring together the sector to meet the aims of both during the pandemic, but also afterwards. And I hope that this will be a long-term tool that will mean that together, both the government and higher education institutions can work closely and collaboratively, because clearly the government has a role to play here too. That's why we announced our stabilisation package for the sector in May to give certainty, why we announced the restructuring regime, why Bayes announced nearly 280 million of government funding as well. Because it's important that we do support our students, that we protect our world-class research base, and we recognise the critical role that universities play in both their local regions and the economy at large. And I personally try my best to champion the work of universities for these very reasons. And in return, my ask is that you make sure that you continue to prioritise student experience and education, which I know you do so well. For instance, the University of Worcestershire has developed an online case study format for undergraduate paramedics. And this provides images and videos of scenes and patients to create realistic simulated patients, in which students can really begin to question the patients through microphones and chat functions. So bringing alive the scenarios. And this means that we can begin to think about these issues and the topics in a more broader format, and how we can transfer student skills to employability skills as well, and utilize technology for that. So looking at things like project management, leadership, collaboration, presentational and communication skills, I know that Montfort University, for instance, has delivered a completely new scheme, the COVID-19 Remote Voluntary Digital Support Scheme for Businesses. It's a bit of a mouthful, but it is a good scheme, supporting the Leicester SME business community. And now is also the time to make universities much more flexible and accessible and more innovative. This is certainly a priority for our government. The economy is in a process of rapid change. It's driven by the internet and remote communications, but the pandemic is accelerating these changes. So we do need to encourage more students to be taking STEM subjects to meet the skills and the future skills and fill those skills gaps that we have. And you'll have seen that the other month that we announced our commitment to introduce a lifelong learning loan entitlement as part of our lifetime skills guarantee. This will be a game changer. I truly believe that, in making higher education much more flexible and unlocking higher education as a tool for people in all different ages and stages of their life, and really being transformational in terms of social mobility. And this is why we're also driving initiatives such as establishing institutes of technology to help meet STEM skills needs and working with employers and local enterprise partnerships. And we funded the Institute of Coding to help improve digital skills at level 6 and 7. And I'm sure that the sector will rise to the challenges ahead, building on the sound foundations of what are already in place. It's also important to note before I finish, and I'm sure I'm over time, so I will hurry, but that we have also commissioned with the chair of the Office for Students, Michael Barber, a review of how digital technology has been utilised to deliver remote teaching and learning across the sector since the start of the pandemic. And I think the findings from this will be especially important when we look at what some of the challenges are, particularly around things like digital poverty and making sure that we can really utilise technology to the true extent of the tools available. And this review will give us some idea of how universities can better seize these opportunities too, and some examples of fantastic best practice that we can share. And I know that the pace of change this year has been, quite frankly, phenomenal. But my faith in your ability has risen just as fast. And so you've shown yourselves to be extremely capable and incredible at things that a year ago we would have questioned whether they were possible. So I have every faith that as a sector, everyone will keep pushing those boundaries as you have done, and always ensuring that students are prioritised and that we can achieve genuine social mobility. So I look forward to working with you over the coming year, which I hope we manage to return to somewhat more of normality over the progress of that year. But I also look forward to utilising the lessons that we've learnt over the last few months, and also the skills that we've gained and the advances that we have achieved as well. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Michelle. That was very illuminating, and thank you for setting the debate going. I forgot to give you the hashtag, which for people who wish to tweet, it's FST Online Teach. We're now going to hear from Paul Feldman, who has a background in technology advice and research, and of course has been the chief executive of JISC since 2015, absolutely the sharp end of the digital revolution. Paul, over to you.
Thanks, David. Hopefully you can all see my screen. Somebody let me know if it's not working. So just for those of you that don't know who we are, we're the UK's digital body for tertiary education and research, and that piece in green at the bottom. Our vision is to make the UK the world leader in the use of technology in this space, and arguably we are thereabouts already. And I need to work out which button to press to move on. There we go. I mean, well, we're funded by all the 4 UK governments to do this, and we provide a wide range of services. One of which is thought leadership in the use of technology in education. And as part of this, when COVID hit, we did a couple of collaborative exercises with the sector. Very broadly, we were trying to get as much of the sector together to try and look at how do we learn from these lessons. They're very much building on what the Minister has been saying. And we did a similar exercise in further education as well, with the AOC that came up with very similar responses. I'd say the digital poverty is more exacerbated in further education, but still very real. What I'm going to do now is to take you a really sort of canter through what we found, and I would point you at these reports for you and your teams to delve into. In terms of the scope, we very much looked at how do we help the sector deal with the current year, and then very much sort of helping the sector think about that build back better. I think universally we were hearing senior leaders say they wanted to build on this, and as the Minister has pointed out, so we've looked at how do we advise the sector to really make sure that the next year is the first of the transition, as it were. We also thought it was important to frame it within a strategic context. So there was work already going on for a vision for 2030. So we've brought that in, so there was a coherent program. And then beyond of that, 2 or 3 years ago, we set out our Education 4 vision, which is the longer term future of the impact of the fourth industrial revolution on the way that we teach and that transformation. So put all that together and we have a coherent picture in which to set the strategy for our institutions. Don't expect you to read all this. I'll very quickly go through this. So these are some of the messages that were coming out through the over 1,000 people that we talked to amongst the sector, and the many webinars that we ran to get the seed corn for the recommendations. And the clear messages from students, from lecturers and senior leaders was, actually, there's something good in this online that we want to build on. And quite a difference between what was done in emergency way in March and what we're now seeing happening in institutions in the current academic year. There certainly were key messages coming out on digital poverty from across the piece, from students, from leaders and lecturers. But as I say, still a real view that online has real value, and we need to work out how to use it. Certainly some view that the technology in some spaces wasn't quite there in the way we want it to be, but not surprising given the very fast pace. And the last one is one that we really there's still real challenges on how the practical subjects and the creative arts really make use of online to create the transformation that we're seeing in other teaching. And we're still doing work in that space. But just to delve in very slightly on this, so and there's all these results are on our website. Certainly clear view from lecturers that they can see the value, particularly in the pandemic, but going forward in how online can make a difference in the way that they teach, in terms of the advantages. And the concerns, not surprisingly, are ones about interactivity and how disadvantaged students really take part in learning in this way. I think this is really fascinating and a real testament to the work that's gone on in the sector. Pre-pandemic, almost 49% of our lecturers felt confident in this space. By the start of the year, 75% of our lecturers felt confident, partly through experience and partly through the work that the sector did to train them up and give them the better tools to do all this. So I think that's a great testament to the hard work that went on in the summer. In terms of learners, you can read this to say that students see online as great because they can finally achieve their dream of sitting in their beds and getting their teaching, and certainly there's a lot of that going on there. But in terms of the things they were most worried about and felt most the online wasn't quite dealing with, again, not surprising. It's just that lack of interactivity, and the isolation one is one we need to keep a very close eye on. Now, how much of these results are because of COVID and the restrictions on being able to meet, combined with online teaching, and how much is a real factor of online, we don't know, but it is one we'll come back to post-COVID and really try and learn from. But certainly using technology to create interactivity for the generation of students we currently have is certainly a soluble problem. I wasn't going to play it now because it's a few minutes long, but we have a great clip from a Woman's Hour program in February of this year, so pre-COVID, of 2 young women talking about friendship and how they will actually just open up FaceTime of an evening and have it open. And from them, that's meeting. And they'll go about their business, cooking, studying, whatever else it is, talking to each other very occasionally. But for them, that's meeting and that's interactivity. And I think it's really getting ourselves in the head of our young people to understand how we can use technology to address these issues. But ultimately, none of us are saying that face-to-face is dead. It's how we use the technology to enhance the campus experience. A whole set of challenges in terms of how we prepare for 21-22. Very clear view from all of our leaders that they do want to take advantage and build back better. And these are the challenges and the things we need to look at in terms of helping our universities really grab this and make it work for the coming year. And this is where our recommendations, where there's a summary of the recommendations that are in the report. And the clear number one is to do this in a strategic way for a top-down view on how digital is going to change every institution's view on the way that it teaches. And it has to be every institution's view. It's not a sector view. So every institution needs to develop its own strategy and way of digitally transforming to change the way that it teaches and learns for the coming for the next year. I think there's a challenge for the sector in how we get together and collaborate to create materials to help this. I mean, certainly a JISC view is that we don't want to see 150 different ways of explaining the same thing, because this is expensive to do, online teaching. In some sectors, online looks to be cheaper. It's not in teaching. The metric that was used in FE is it takes 10 hours of lecturers' time to create 1 hour of teaching. As we look to the new technologies, we will see an awful lot more than that. Things like virtual reality is a really expensive thing to start with. And actually, we'd like to see the sector working together on that. We also believe it's not right to just take face-to-face and automate it, as it were. And we think universities need to sit back and look at their curriculum and design them for the future and use students to help do that. And the last point is all of us need to get together and look at how we fight the digital poverty and data poverty issues. When we look at 2030, this was the vision the sector gave us. The UK wants to be world-class in this space, and I think we all believe that it really needs to be if it continues to be competitive. And it's great that that's the desire out of the sector. When we looked at, we're looking at an interesting transition. So if this is the spectrum at a high level of the type of teaching there can be, on the left we have face-to-face, which is where we were pretty much pre-pandemic. And we're in that pink box at the moment. The sort of teaching that's going on at the moment is very much lecturer-led push out to students. What we're expecting to see over the next 10 years is a transition to much more pull from students in charge of their own learning, with technology gradually supporting them much more in that. So by 2030, they're doing their own learning with lecturers supporting them and sort of challenging them to ensure they have all the right sort of skills. And of course, the blue box full online. There's great examples today with Open University and quite a lot of online courses that are fully online. That's really in parallel. We believe the mainstream campus-based model will be that purple student-led learning. These are the principles that we think universities need to get underneath in terms of their view, their vision to get to 2030. Well, I'm not going to go through them. They're in the report that's on our website, and I'll encourage you to look at them there. But a whole range of things that our sector needs to get underneath and really understand what it means for them. If we look beyond this, this is, say, our Education 4 vision. And the key thing here is we do believe technologies around the fourth industrial revolution technologies can actually transform the way that we teach, because it can transform the way that students learn. And we believe that artificial intelligence is the key to doing this, along with things like virtual reality and analytics. But underlying this, we believe that artificial intelligence can really transform over the next 10 to 15 years the learning experience. And ultimately, sometime in the future, I believe my great-grandchildren will almost be assigned an artificial intelligence tutor that sees them through their lifelong learning, that really gets to know them and understands them and helps them through their learning journeys and gives them the materials in ways that are appropriate to them and fit their own personality and learning preferences. And if we get all this right, we can actually rethink completely the way we assess students' capabilities and get away from high stakes exams into really just credentialing them when they're capable, as opposed to at a particular time frame. And of course, all of this gives us the opportunity to rethink how we use our campuses. The other piece we always come back to as well when we talk about the future is to remind people that the world of work is changing. The world of people's careers are changing dramatically over coming years. And universities need to rethink not just the way they teach, but what they teach. And we need to ensure that we teach our students for the future and give them those soft skills rather than particular professional skills that may well be out of date. So helping a lawyer sort of remember the law, helping an accountant know how to put accounts together, or a doctor even how to diagnose, are all skills for today, not skills for tomorrow, because technology is going to be better at that than people. And we need to give our students the capability to understand how to reinvent themselves, how to take part in lifelong learning, but most importantly, those critical skills and those human-to-human skills that are our future. Now, we do believe that the key need for the UK is to really get underneath artificial intelligence in the use of teaching and be a leader in this. Today, China is the leader in use of artificial intelligence in teaching. If UK wants to be world leader, and if we want to be in charge of our own way of teaching, we believe the UK does need to reinvest in the use of artificial intelligence, certainly in tertiary space. And Minister, you may be aware, but we actually submitted a comprehensive spending review request for funding to create this centre into the DFE, both for FE and HE. But certainly we believe something like this is essential if the UK wants to stay a leader in the use of teaching, in teaching and higher education. And I will end there. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Paul. Very interesting. And thank you for showing what JISC has been contributing to this debate. We now turn to Professor Sarah Spate. Her discipline is medieval history. She has worked with Future Learn. She is Pro VC for education at the University of Nottingham. Sarah, thank you very much for joining our panel. Over to you.
Thank you very much. And I must say that it's really encouraging to see that we've had obviously the minister, we've had the leader of a kind of sector-wide body, and now we've got a leader from an individual institution. And there's an awful lot of commonality in what we're saying, which speaks to the potential strengths of our collaborations over the next few years. So anyway, thank you very much indeed for the invitation to speak this evening. Sometimes I'm known in my institution at the moment as PVC Pandemic. So I guess what I'm going to do is just kind of give you a kind of a Nottingham flavour of many of the things that my panel colleagues have been saying. But I want to start actually with just a slight challenge back on the title of the event, because there's been two versions circulating out there. So we've got online teaching in higher education. There's also been online and blended teaching out there in higher education. And actually the minister also talked about remote learning, which is a word that's been commonly used this year, but it's a slightly odd one, isn't it? Because it just sounds so unfriendly. So I think there's still a bit of confusion amongst us all about exactly what are we trying to do. And actually, I can also remember back in the summer that Advance HE published, I think it was a 13-page report on our lexicon for digitally enabled teaching and learning. So there's a level of confusion that we're generating, I think, in ourselves, in our students, and we'll also be confusing some of our parents and creating a bit of a distraction from the real job that obviously that we're trying to do to ensure that students can meet their learning outcomes. And I would say that obviously the media pick up on that confusion. And so we end up with this bit of political polarization between face-to-face and in-person teaching and the online. And somehow online gets positioned as the second class, the easy and the cheap. So the kind of first point I really wanted to make was that we absolutely need to be clear what we're talking about and make sure that our debate and our discussion are in the right space as well as in the right place. So what I want to talk about is kind of blended learning. And for me, that's about a purposeful pedagogy. So clearly pedagogy that's fit for purpose, a pedagogy that makes choices and is designed to support student learning. And of course, that means designing in well-being, mental health and motivation, all those essential ingredients for learning as well as for life. So blended learning has a really strong focus upon design. Paul was talking about that, task differentiated practice, personalization, engagement, complementarity. But most importantly, it's not hierarchical. It's not judging one practice, technology or tool to be better than another. It's defining the right tools for the task. And of course, the tasks are the knowledge acquisition, the inquiry and the research, the discussion, the collaboration, the practice and the production, kind of adapted for the phase of the student journey, first year, third year, postgraduate, and of course for the discipline. My second point is to just say that obviously learning and change are the DNA of universities. That is what we are all about. So in no sense are we dinosaurs clinging to the sage on the stage model of transmission. We've been using virtual learning environments since the 1990s, yes, principally for the management of our teaching, but increasingly to support the delivery of teaching. And it's back in the 1990s that the concept of blended learning actually emerged. And so the technologies that we use, yes, they change over time. We adapt them, we develop them in context and in partnership. And many of our digital tools have emerged as responses to the massification of higher education in the 1990s. So they were a response to scale. Now, one of the reasons, again, as Lord Willett said, that I was invited to this event is because of my earlier work with MOOCs and with FutureLearn. So just dipping back into those for a moment, the MOOC movement, the massive open online courses, begins in 2008 in North America. They were heralded as a great disruptor, weren't they? Some of you'll remember the headlines, the potential end of the university as we know it, the great redundancy of university lecturers. The disruption wasn't in the market. Instead, they caused a ripple in our pedagogies, and we took that learning into our mainstream. We started flipping more, we started scaffolding more, we developed our skills as facilitators of learning. And the MOOCs taught us the power of video, although principally of audio rather than video. And they taught us about the importance of online socialization, the difference between comment and discussion in a virtual forum. Now, as higher education professionals, our skills of learners has helped us significantly in 2020, where our biggest challenge has been pace. Again, that's a word that the minister used. And it continues to be difficult to find the time to reflect on our learning. So we're always on a journey, we don't stand still, but this year we've been sprinting rather than jogging. And just to take that metaphor a bit further, of course, if you're sprinting, it's really difficult to look backwards. If you're jogging, you can have a conversation as you go. You can plan, you can do, you can check, and you can act, and then you can start the cycle all over again. In 2020, pace has also been really challenging for our students. And ironically, in contrast to some of the media positioning, our students have been telling us that they feel that they've got more work to do than normal. They have felt overworked. And some of the reasons around that is that there's no excuse for missing a lecture if your lectures are online and if they've been pre-recorded. And there is every temptation to rewind your bite-sized videos and ensure that you extract every ounce of goodness from them. Now, there may be an element of staff overcompensating for COVID disruption, but again, as Paul said, it's really clear that our students need more help with learning how to learn in a blended environment. They need help with their time management, their pacing again, adapting to that revised diet of coursework and exams. And they've also had that cognitive overload from switching from the face-to-face in-person teaching to the synchronous online to the asynchronous online. Now, all of this is challenging for them, and it's not easily captured in their timetable or their schedule. So what most universities are doing is we are hurriedly building our systems to track engagement as opposed to attendance. And until we've got these systems, we will be worrying about those students who may fall down the cracks and kind of lose their ability to keep up with their peers. But I must absolutely stress that the students of 2020, they are no lost generation. You know, they are a remarkable generation who've experienced rapid personal and professional growth. And I do hope that employers will be recognizing that. And that really leads me to my kind of third big point, again, which also chimes with my panel colleagues this evening. We're all in this together. So in 2020, university staff have demonstrated their abilities to work together across disciplines and job families in the interests of our students and with our students. And our focus has absolutely been on collaboration, partnership, support, empathy, engagement, evaluation. From a student perspective, we can now see where the glue is missing. Our students need space and time to become social learners again. They need to engage with their content, with their tutors, but also with their peers. That's what's most lacking as we head towards the end of the first semester in 2020-21. For first years in particular, they're struggling to find their study buddies, their learning sets. They need a digital equivalent of going for a coffee at the end of the lecture. They need to take that example of the woman's hour story that Paul referred to. And we've got to help them to build those academic social relationships so that they can ask questions in their online sessions again and get rid of that burden of the imposter syndrome that so many of them will probably be feeling. And one of my engineering colleagues made a very relevant observation to me yesterday. He said that pre-COVID, by this time in the academic year, he would have known the names and the faces of about 75% of the new first years in his cohort. This year, at the same time, he reckons he knows the names and faces of only about 10%. So social learning is being compromised for everyone at the moment. And you know, it's quite a challenge to demonstrate your passion for your subject to a screen of avatars or to your own slides. You know, it takes a bit of doing. We can manage it for 10 minutes, but if you're doing it for a couple of hours, that's quite exhausting. So we know that digital poverty is affecting many of our students. Let's also not forget that it's affecting our staff too. So we've got to build capability, capacity, confidence, so that our community can absolutely benefit from those purposeful pedagogies delivered through our blended learning in a really supportive environment that's got well-being designed into it, so at its heart. And the "we're all in it together" mantra, of course, includes the sector bodies, the professional membership groups, the PSRBs, the graduate employers, and of course, government. And as we move through COVID and beyond, we want a partnership approach so that UK higher education can remain world leading and student centric. Our approaches to evaluation, to monitoring, to regulation also need to be fit for purpose in these changed contexts. The review of the National Student Satisfaction Survey, the NSS, is a great opportunity to signal this, giving us a chance to really think through the purpose of the survey and our ability to use it to drive student engagement and quality enhancement. So finally, a time of crisis is always a time of accelerated learning. We see this in the role that UK higher education is playing in the development of tests, treatments, vaccines for COVID-19. We see it in our accelerated uptake of blended learning in 2020. Universities are not longing or seeking to head back to some misrepresentation of a pre-COVID age of teaching. We will absolutely stick to our continuous enhancement journey, but both students and staff need to get back that bit of serendipity and happenstance into our working and our studying lives. We've got to get the social learning back into the blend. Now, there are a few nifty slogans that I could end on. The future is blended. 2020 is the new 2030. It's the end of the lecture as we know it. But actually, I don't think much can beat that expression of John Dewey's, the American philosopher and an educationalist who died in 1952. So it's an old one, and sometimes the old ones are the good ones. If we teach today as we taught yesterday, absolutely we'll be robbing our children of tomorrow. So that's me. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Sarah. 3 excellent presentations and a whole string of questions coming in. And let me now turn to the panel, really a question which begins with the point that Peter Matheson has made. Are we in danger of assuming, how do we escape the rhetoric that assumes when it comes to online versus face-to-face, that face-to-face is good and online is second best? But through the Q&A, there have been some good practical examples of the challenges facing online education. One question has been about those disciplines where you do need physically to work with kit in order to get a professional qualification. How can that be done online? Another question is about the social side of this, which, let's face it, is part of what students value about university. How can that be delivered online? And then there's also been a strand of our anxieties about online and access, which is both kind of the technological side. Someone's asking about mobile phone charges, but also having a quiet room, the great Virginia Woolf question. Will people have a room of their own in which to study? So there are various anxieties about online surfacing in Q&A. I'm going to start with you, Sarah. Do you want to comment on those? You've always been wrestling with that at Nottingham, and then I'll turn to my other panelists.
Thank you very much. Yes, they're great questions. They're absolutely the things that I think all institutions are wrestling with, and our sector bodies will be wrestling to as they try to help us. So access and inclusivity will be #1 challenges for us. And so obviously we're thinking about how do we reshape the estate over the next few years for a growth and development of blended learning, but how do we ensure that development is absolutely fit for purpose for the disciplines? So I don't think any of us would be saying it's technology for the sake of it. It's technology that enhances and enables us to do great stuff. And how do we ensure that those technologies, so we have to come down to a kind of baseline. You know, what's a baseline? It's that thing about getting a kind of a bronze medal level of technology supported blended learning, which everyone can access, rather than heading straight for the gold medal level. I think that's how I would conceptualize it. And that's what we're endeavoring to do at the moment. So always being aware, who are the students who haven't got space, who are the sofa surfers, what are the facilities that absolutely we need to still have on campus for them, for that group space and that individual study space, even when a lot of our teaching delivery might actually be moving online. So there's a bit of a partial answer for you, David.
Thanks, Sarah. I'm now going to turn to Michelle and add the twist, which a question that Michelle has been facing a lot recently. What about those people who say, hang on, students who thought they were going to get a physical experience at university and it's mainly online, they should be entitled to a reduction in their fees as a result. What's your assessment, Michelle, of some of these anxieties about online and whether it should be reflected in fee levels?
Yes, so that is a question that I am regularly faced with. So I think the important thing isn't the medium for which learning occurs, but the quality that is delivered. And just because something is online doesn't mean it has to be in theory. And we've been very clear working with the OFS that the quality has to be maintained, the actual quantity of learning maintained, and the accessibility is crucial too. And the CMA were clear earlier on in the year that universities needed to be as upfront as they could be in terms of what students would expect, obviously within the ramifications of potential national restrictions, etc., and having an impact on universities. So most universities, if not all, were very upfront about the fact that it would be a blended offer. The proportions of that blend have changed as we've been along this journey. But I think I do reiterate that the most important thing here is the quality of education that young people are getting, and should they feel that that isn't there is a process in place. But going back to your point a moment ago around and then it was in the chat around students not potentially having adequate space and linking that with digital poverty, I actually decouple that from the digital talk, and I would refer to that more as study poverty in general, because if you don't have the adequate space and the right setup in your home environment, whether you're utilizing technology or not, you're not going to be able to potentially reach your true potential in your learning. So I think that can come into play in either environment.
Thank you very much. Yes, and a very important point that you just made. Paul, any observations on ensuring the quality of the digital online teaching?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And just if I can come back on some of the other points, I mean, the key thing we're talking about is the use of technology to change the way lectures happen. What we're not saying is the end of the campus experience. And I think that's the key point. It's just a different way of teaching within that space. And so the whole quality piece is around how good are our lecturers at using the technology to actually get their points across, and how good are we at supporting them with the tools, with the content, with the advice at how to do that. And then building on Sarah's point and a few of the issues as well, the campus experience is all about that social interaction and students working with each other and lecturers working with students, ideally face-to-face. And come the new year, hopefully we'll all be back on campuses and this will be a true blended model. And we'll be back to lecturers really being able to work with students to ensure that they're really understanding the content. So, and we're in an emergency, we're in a pandemic. This isn't the norm. Hopefully the norm come next September is one much more of a true blend.
Right. Thank you. Let's follow up then on that point by saying, I'm going to invite all three of our panelists to speculate about where we will be in 5 or 10 years. One or two of the questions are asking about 2030. So we're hearing that we're going to be moving back towards more blended learning, but how radical might the changes be over the next decade? One argument has been, of course, that by and large, the digital revolution drives disintermediation. The retail shop around the corner disappears and you go to Amazon. Well, will people who've done an online course decide they don't need a university degree stamp on it? It can be invigilated and moderated and assessed and stuck on your LinkedIn profile. And is the university disintermediated is one question that's been raised. And I would like to add a personal question to the list as well, which is, I think there's a striking contrast between the way in which the health debate on privacy and data is so advanced and the education debate about privacy and data is so limited. Do we think there is a point when, are we confident we've got the right ethical framework for universities who could potentially know an awful lot about their students via their online activities, even just their educational ones? So are we in danger of a care.data revolt at some point? So some speculation about the future. Paul, why don't you comment first, and then I'll go to Michelle.
If I start with the ethical question, I mean, it is a key question. We, together with the National Union of Students, we created a code of ethics for use of data in teaching a couple of years ago. It's available from them. It's on our website. It's been signed up to by the sector. I think as technology changes the things even further, we do need to revisit that. And there's work happening on ethics of use of artificial intelligence in teaching as well. So a lot to do to really answer that question, and it's a moving feast, but it's certainly one that we are tackling as a sector. But coming back to what is that vision? I mean, just to be clear, the JISC vision is very much one of campuses will be with us forever. As Peter Pathamathison mentions right at the beginning of the questions, kids don't go to university just to learn, just to get a degree. They learn to grow up. They learn to meet new friends. They learn to start their life away from home. And that experience, we believe, is critical and needs to continue, whatever the pedagogical model is. The thing that we're focused on is we believe technology can increasingly take the drudgery away from teaching. So I used to be a lecturer many years ago when I did my PhD, and fortunately I had to give a course once. I would have got very bored giving that same course year after year. Now the technology can take that drudgery away, and lecturers can spend their time challenging the critical thinking of our students, giving them the soft skills. That's what we think the model will be in the future. So just a shift. Technology doing what it's great at doing is taking the mundane out, and people doing what they're great at doing, which is managing the human condition. So it's a different model, but it might not look that different to today, which we think would be a success.
Right, thank you. Now, and Michelle, and to what extent is there a role for government here in pushing innovation in online education and trying to enrich digital education and presumably also monitor its quality as we move into this brave new world?
Yeah, so obviously things are very different at the moment, and universities have been pushed into this quite quickly to react and adapt to the pandemic and the situation that we all find ourselves in. But in terms of looking ahead to the decades that lie before us, I do think that this will, to quote Sarah, enhance the learning experience that students have, and it won't replace it. I think we're all in agreement that we're not looking at a model where campuses are dead or where the student experience isn't there. And that's something that has been greatly restricted over the last term because of the COVID regulations, and it's something that we all want to get back to. They do develop some of those softer skills and life enhancing experiences at university and networks that they will take forward for the rest of their lives. And friendships, etc. But I do think that that technology will continue to enhance that learning process, and I think that it opens up opportunities. So, for instance, where international students may not come for the entirety of a degree, they may come for one segment of it and study the rest of it remotely. So it means that our education system can be much more accessible on a global platform. It can help make higher education more accessible for people that potentially are ill, or that want to travel more, or that are still working as well. It offers many more opportunities to unlock higher education for people in all stages of life as well. And so I think it is really positive when we look forward as to what that will present us, but I think none of us really know where technology will be in a few decades' time either to truly speak to the question. And when we look back at how far we've come in the last 20 years, we can only imagine how far we will go in the next 20 and what that will truly mean for education and for students.
Thank you very much. Now, Michelle, now over to Sarah, your observations.
You probably think this panel agree with each other too much, David. You want a bit more of a row in here, but if I just give a slight, perhaps different stress on some of very similar points. So my first point would be, in a sense, what does 2040 look like? Well, actually, when we talk to the current students of 2020, they're seeing 2040 as being remarkably similar to 2020, and that I organised a kind of a conference with a number of European universities in Brussels in the autumn of 2018, and the conference was all about the higher education in 2040. Now, we had a couple of students from about 20 different universities. Most of them wanted to be vice chancellors, so they saw themselves, running higher education, but and obviously their children going through it. But they were remarkably traditional in their views. So as Peter said, as Paul said, they wanted that on-campus residential experience. They wanted the glue that went around the academic learning. What they probably want and can have by 2040 is better use of their contact time. So again, I love the way Paul talked about taking away some of the drudge. So yes, there's that. There's also taking away some of the learning that is better done in your own time and at your own pace, and then really being able to make the best use of your quality contact time with your academic experts and of course with your peers. There is sometimes a nervousness on the part of students in terms of how we use their data, but of course if they know how we're using it, they're much more comfortable, particularly if they know that we are using that data. We're looking at how many times they're logging into the VLE and accessing their videos and how many postings they're making and so on. We're using that to see, are they falling behind? And then we're having conversations with them rather than policing them. If it's a conversation, they're normally quite happy. I completely agree with the Minister that one of the things we'll see coming up is, in a sense, greater diversification and perhaps a lifelong learning model, which is about make once, use many, isn't it? So you've got your fantastic experts in AI who are developing a course that doesn't just need to be a BA, BSc or an MA. It can be providing your CPD, your credit bearing, your non-credit bearing, multiple modes so that people are able to move in and out of them as suits the needs of their career trajectories and their private and personal lives. And then it's just, of course, thinking about the outcomes. At the end of the day, it'll be about what are our students emerging with? Are these new modes narrowing and reducing our degree awarding gaps? Can we see that we've increased diversification, and therefore are we putting out a kind of an even more better equipped set of graduates into an employment market that will be rapidly changing?
Thank you very much, Sarah. Now we're going to try to end at 7. So I'm just going to very briefly ask people for a final observation on where they think this is going and what more is needed. There are some powerful forces at work. I'm going to start with you, Paul, then Sarah, and I will give the last word to the Minister. And have to be brief, I'm afraid.
I do think something fundamental shifted in March for the good. I do think we need to nurture it and really pay attention to students' needs. But I think we're going into a great place where the UK can be this world leader, and I think this is a sector that can actually manage that when done wisely and carefully. And I think it's going to be a great place for our students of the future.
Very good. Sarah, a final observation?
We've demonstrated what we can do in a remarkably short space of time. If we can give ourselves a bit more time and a bit of more reflection, my God, it can be even better.
Fantastic. And Michelle, and to what extent you as the Minister think this is a change you can drive? You need to strengthen quality monitoring. Your observations about where we're going.
Yes, so the sector have risen to the challenge extraordinarily quickly in some of the most difficult times that we have experienced, especially in modern times. And so I have every faith that the sector can continue to build on that really good foundation that has been laid. And it is about cementing that now and seeing what exactly worked best, what didn't work best, what supports students, and then utilizing technology as it continues to develop. I think we've all spoken about this being the beginning rather than the end of this journey.
Well, thank you very much indeed. Thank you to all of our panelists. Thank you for your enthusiasm for this and for embracing the future. Particular thanks to the Minister. It was very good of Michelle to spare the time to join us. And as an example of what's possible digitally, while we've been in our conference, I've also been voting in the House of Lords with the government on the internal market bill. And if someone had told me at the beginning of the year I could be voting online in the Lords, I would not have believed them. So there's been lots of innovation and most of it a good thing. I'm sorry that there was one technical glitch. Technologies don't always work perfectly. I think the upvoting that I was hoping for didn't work this evening. I'm sorry, we'll sort that out before next time. Thank you to all of our panelists, particularly the Minister, and thank you to all our participants.